"Grandma, tonight my parents are going to take away all your fortune," whispered my grandson. "Grandma," Noah whispered, tugging my sleeve as the music played on, "Mom and Dad are going to take everything from you tonight." He said it like a secret, too dangerous to speak aloud, his breath warm against my ear in the middle of what was supposed to be my birthday celebration. The room around us sparkled with chandeliers and soft jazz, glasses clinking, laughter spilling into the air like champagne, but none of it belonged to me. Not really. I was seated at a side table near the service doors, where the servers came and went in a rush of trays and polite apologies. My dinner was late. The chicken was cold. No one asked if I wanted wine. The floral arrangements towered above me like barriers, as if I had been placed behind a wall on purpose. I checked the program tucked under the napkin. There were 4 scheduled speakers. My name was not among them. Andrew stood at the podium now. My son, not by blood but by choice. I had raised him since he was a newborn, abandoned in a hospital bassinet. He used to call me Mama in his sleep. Now he beamed under the stage lights like they had always belonged to him. His voice was steady, rehearsed, just emotional enough. "Tonight," he said, "we celebrate legacy, family, and the woman who made it all possible." The guests clapped politely. Clarissa stood beside him, perfectly styled, perfectly poised, holding his hand with one of hers and a microphone in the other. Her diamond bracelet caught the light as she smiled sweetly at the crowd and added, "We are so grateful for the woman who helped us get here." Though, to be honest, I never really knew her well. She always felt like a distant grandmother. She looked at me then, briefly, deliberately, and smiled as if she'd paid me a compliment. Distant grandmother. I sat still, hands folded, the burn of her words far colder than the plate in front of me. I had signed over my house to Andrew and Clarissa 3 years ago, after Andrew lost his job and they promised they just needed a fresh start. I had paid off their debts. I had funded the renovations of this very home where they now threw this elegant gathering. And still, I was the stranger. I glanced down at Noah. His small hand gripped mine tightly. I remembered teaching him to ride a bike in the parking lot behind our office. He fell twice, then looked up at me and said, "Do you think I can still be brave?" I told him then, bravery is not about balance. It's about getting back up. He didn't smile. He didn't eat. He just looked up at me with those wide brown eyes that had once belonged to my daughter, my real daughter, before the hospital mixed up records and gave me a child they claimed was mine. Noah, though, he knew. He saw. They already put the papers on your desk. I saw Dad's laptop was open. The file said estate draft, final sign-off. I clicked it by accident, but I remember the name. It had your signature scanned in, he said quietly. They said it's just for emergency transfer. But I peeked. It's everything. The company, the LAS account, even the garden. They're going to make you sign it after dinner, when you're tired. I inhaled slowly, quietly, not with panic, with clarity. Andrew had just lifted his champagne glass, toasting to resilience and grace, and the room erupted in claps again. But I knew what resilience really looked like. It looked like standing alone in a lawyer's office with a pen in your hand and a baby in your arms, signing adoption papers when you had nothing else. It looked like growing a business from scratch while pretending not to hear when people whispered, "She's too old to keep up." Now they were ready to erase me entirely. But I was not tired. Not yet. 70 years. That is what the invitation said. A grand celebration for a grand woman. 70 years of wisdom, grace, and family. I remember thinking, when I first saw the gilded lettering, that perhaps there had been a mistake, because no one consulted me before planning it. The guest list went out without my input. The menu was curated without my taste. The speeches were written without my story. And on the night itself, I became certain this celebration was not about me. It was about erasing me gently, with violins and champagne. I arrived 10 minutes early, wearing the navy dress I had saved for my granddaughter's graduation. It still fit. I had my hair set at the same salon I had visited for decades. The stylist, bless her, said I looked regal. But at the front door, the greeter, hired, I assume, asked if I was here for catering. I told her my name. Her smile faltered, and she nodded me toward a corner table near the emergency exit. That table became my post for the evening, far from the stage, near the kitchen. The floral centerpiece was so tall I could not see the podium unless I leaned. So I did not lean. I just listened. The music swelled, the lights dimmed, and there was Andrew, my son, not of blood, but of 35 years of scraped knees, math homework, hospital visits, and tuition checks. I found him in a hospital nursery after losing my daughter to a clerical nightmare and postpartum confusion that no one would explain. The nurses said he had no mother. I took him home, raised him with everything I had, and now he stood at the microphone, handsome in his tailored suit, smiling like the cameras were meant for him alone. My mother, he began, taught me discipline, drive, and dedication. There was applause. He nodded graciously. But of course, I'm speaking of the mother who raised me, not my biological one, who passed away when I was a baby. The woman who gave me shelter, my foster mother. My second chance. Let's give a round of applause for her, shall we? Foster mother. Second chance, no name, no warmth, just a subtle distancing. Clarissa stood beside him, holding his arm. She leaned in and took the microphone with practiced elegance. It's important we honor the truth, she said. Andrew's strength comes from his roots, yes, but not all roots are permanent. Some are temporary supports. We're grateful for every chapter. She turned toward me then, smiling as if she had shared something profound. And we're especially grateful for his foster mother's generosity. Without her, we would not have made it this far. There were polite claps. I nodded once, acknowledging nothing. Later, during the toast, Clarissa added, I keep telling her she should finish signing things while her memory's still sharp. Otherwise, in a few months, we'll be chasing down power of attorney papers like it's elder daycare. Laughter rippled through their table. My knife clinked softly against the plate. Cold fish, no salt. I hadn't touched it. Across from me sat Noah, my grandson, Andrew and Clarissa's boy. He was 10, small for his age, always watching. That night, he had barely touched his juice. Grandma, he whispered. They said tonight's the night. I turned to him. His hands were folded in his lap. His eyes were wide. They're taking you to the doctor after this, he said, to check your memory. Dad said if you forget even one address, they'll use that to move your stuff. Mom said you might not even come back here. They already packed some things. I did not flinch. I just looked at him. They said it's just paperwork, he added, and that they love you. But I saw Dad practicing your signature. He had your will on the screen. I reached across the table and placed my hand over his. Thank you for telling me, I said as softly as I could. He nodded once, eyes full of something far too old for 10. On the far end of the ballroom was a projection screen showing photos of family through the years. Smiling faces, beach vacations, graduation caps, hospital bracelets. There were baby pictures, school portraits, wedding photos, and Christmas dinners. I looked for myself. There were none, not even one. In a photo from Andrew's college graduation, where I had stood at the back in the rain, clapping with both hands, my image had been cropped. In a wedding photo from 10 years ago, I had paid for the flowers and the venue, and my name had been omitted from the thank you speech. In a Christmas photo from 3 years ago, I had been asked to take the picture, not be in it. The pattern was clear now. I had been erased, slowly, carefully, lovingly even. So the birthday celebration was not a tribute. It was a transition. From matriarch to memory, from guardian to burden. I looked up at the screen. A photo appeared of Andrew and Clarissa holding Noah in a hospital bed. The caption read, 3 generations of hope. There were only 2 people in the frame. I smiled then, not with joy, but with understanding. I had given them everything, and tonight they would ask for the rest, with piano music, with fine wine, with fake tears if needed. But I would not sign, not tonight. Not ever again without reading every word, remembering every name, and reclaiming every part of myself they tried to write out. When I returned home that night, I did not turn on the lights. I knew the way by heart. The floor creaked in familiar places. The shadows of the hallway did not frighten me. What frightened me was how clear everything had become. I walked past the family portraits, each one a still life of a version of love that had expired. In the hallway mirror, I saw myself. Not as they saw me, aged, inconvenient, fading, but as I truly was, sober, intact, and now, completely awake. I entered my office and sat at the old oak desk I had refinished myself when the business first began. The surface still bore faint scratches from Noah's toy cars. That had been years ago, when he was still allowed to spend weekends with me, when he still called me his real grandmother without being corrected. I opened the bottom drawer and pulled out the folder I had kept hidden for months. The paper was thick, the ink dark and final. My legal team had prepared it per my instruction. A conditional stock transfer agreement, 35% of Sterling Group vested in Andrew's name upon his 40th birthday, which was, coincidentally, today, a birthday gift. Not a bonus, not a strategic handoff, just a gift. $70 million worth of company equity, built from scratch and nearly destroyed more than once. All for him, for the son I chose, for the boy who used to cry when I left for work and sleep beside my desk while I balanced the books. I unfolded the contract and looked at the signature line left blank, waiting for me. How foolish. I remembered everything it had taken to create Sterling Group, not just the deals and deadlines, but the humiliations. The first contract I signed for a catering job was in the basement of a church. They paid me with post-dated checks. I cleaned bathrooms between meetings. I sold the sapphire new car my husband had given me before his stroke, the last luxury he ever afforded me, just to afford our first commercial lease. I carried plates at weddings where guests asked if I had any grandchildren yet. I lied and said yes. Andrew was 2, I was 40 and invisible. But I worked. I built. I saved. When the bank refused me a second business loan, I borrowed against my own life insurance. I told no one, not even Andrew. He was 13 then, angry that I could not afford a class trip to Europe. He never asked why, he just sulked. I remember using the last of my emergency fund to pay for his tuxedo. And here I was now, on the night of my own birthday, almost tricked into signing away the legacy that had cost me my health, my marriage, and my youth. Not as a reward for loyalty, but as a bribe for silence. As if erasing me would be worth the payout. I picked up the pen, turned the first page, and looked at the clause I had requested be added. This agreement is executed in good faith, in recognition of love freely given. What good faith? What love? I placed the pen down. I stared at the fireplace across the room. Cold, empty, just like the tone in Clarissa's voice when she joked about my memory. Just like Andrew's applause when the guests toasted to new beginnings. That was what tonight had been about. Not gratitude, not family. A transfer, a takeover. I tore the first page in half. The sound was softer than I expected. Then I tore the second and the third. I did not cry. I did not shake. I tore every page slowly, precisely like someone separating themselves from an old lie. It felt good, not petty, not cruel, just necessary. By the time I finished, the contract was nothing more than a pile of curled paper on the floor. I stood, swept it into the wastebasket, and placed a match beside it. I did not light it. I did not need the drama. The act of refusal was enough. I did not grieve that contract. I grieved the fact that I had once believed I needed to earn my place in their future by giving away my past. That belief had died tonight. In its place was something stronger, not bitterness, but clarity. And clarity, unlike gifts, cannot be revoked. The morning after my birthday, the sky over Grand Haven was the same pale gray it always was in early spring, cool, indifferent, unbothered by the affairs of men or mothers. I arrived just before 7:00 a.m., before the resort opened its brunch buffets, before the spa lights flicked on. The staff nodded respectfully. None of them knew this wasn't just another walkthrough. I headed to the Birchwood Conference Suite, the one with soundproof walls and no windows. Privacy built into its very walls. Waiting inside were 2 men I had trusted longer than I had trusted Andrew, Mr. Rollins, my attorney of 20 years, and Jonathan Chu, the accountant who knew where every penny in Sterling Group had ever gone. They stood as I entered. I motioned for them to sit. "Shall we begin?" I said, not bothering with pleasantries. They exchanged glances, sensing the gravity. I took out the folder marked Directive Revision and slid it across the table. I want to update the will. Effective immediately. I will not be delaying this time. Mr. Rollins opened the folder and reviewed the notes I had written in my own hand. He raised his eyebrows at the first line. Remove Andrew and Clarissa Henderson from all inheritance provisions. No hesitation, no questions. He nodded and began the paperwork. Next, allocate 25% equity of Sterling Group Class A shares to Noah Grant, my biological grandson. Jonathan paused, then, that's a significant transfer, ma'am. It is, I said, and it is just. Jonathan gave a slow nod. Does no one know? No, and he does not need to yet. But when he is ready, when he is grown, he will find the documents waiting. We moved on. I opened a separate file, one I had been working on quietly for the last 2 years, an idea, a dream never spoken aloud. It was labeled Silent Seat Foundation. Mr. Rollins read the mission line. To support and honor mothers who have been erased, by family, by tradition, by betrayal. I instructed him, transfer all remaining assets into the trust, liquid and equity. That includes shares, properties, and residual holdings. Jonathan looked stunned for a moment. That's over $100 million. It is legacy, I corrected. They worked in silence. I signed with firm strokes. No ceremony, no champagne. By 10:00 a.m., the documents were notarized. Andrew and Clarissa were officially removed from every clause they once assumed they had secured. No payouts, no percentages, no severance for moral failure. I did not feel triumphant. I felt aligned. Afterward, I walked the grounds of Grand Haven alone. I watched as couples enjoyed the outdoor cafe. A toddler chased pigeons across the patio. The air smelled of citrus and cedar. I had chosen those scents myself for the seasonal fragrance program. Every detail of this resort bore my fingerprints. I sat on a bench under the camphor tree we planted 15 years ago, when Sterling first hit national revenue targets. Andrew had helped plant it. He was 14 then, muddy and smiling, asking if one day he could build a hotel of his own. He had. He had built a future on the foundation of my silence, and last night he had tried to erase me from it. I sat beneath the tree, watching the sunlight filter through its branches. I did not weep. I did not shake. My chest felt quiet, steady, the kind of stillness that comes only after you finally put down a weight you have carried too long. That afternoon, the quarterly board meeting convened. The directors gathered in the Sequoia room, sipping tea, straightening ties, unaware that anything had changed. I entered precisely at 2:00 p.m., wearing gray silk and no jewelry. I took my seat at the head of the table. Andrew was not present. He had not been invited. Clarissa likewise had no seat. Their names had been removed from the attendance list. Their company ID badges had been deactivated hours earlier. We reviewed the agenda, expansion projects, annual philanthropy updates, projections for Q3. At the end of the meeting, someone asked, "Madam Chair, is there anything else you'd like to add?" I smiled. "Nothing at all," I said. And that was the moment of the quiet strike, not with a press release or a lawsuit or a screaming match, but with calm, with signature ink, with irreversible clarity. When I left the boardroom, I passed a wall of portraits, past chairs of the Sterling board, executives whose names lined history. I stopped and looked at mine, a woman in navy blue, hands folded, gaze direct. Beneath it, a brass plaque, Margaret E. Sterling, founder and CEO. I looked at that face, not the one from last night's birthday party, seated at the side table, forgotten, laughed at, dismissed, but the real one. The woman who knew exactly when to speak, and even better, when to strike. A week later, the whispers started, not in boardrooms, but on brunch patios and bridal forums. Clarissa had begun referring to herself as the future Madame of Sterling Group. She said it with a bright, acidic smile. At a charity luncheon hosted by the Chamber of Commerce, she introduced herself to a local reporter with the line, "My husband is the heir, but I will be the face." She wore pearls I recognized, ones I had given her on her 5th wedding anniversary. I did not reply. I did not need to, because by the following Tuesday, the silence broke itself. It began with an anonymous screenshot leaked to a private business group, an internal legal document showing a recent structural change within Sterling Group's executive hierarchy. Clarissa's name was nowhere on it. Neither was Andrew's. Under the section marked Primary Shareholders with Voting Power, there were only two names, mine and Noah Grant. The post went viral within the industry. Event planners, corporate managers, former employees. Someone tagged the document with a single caption, "Looks like the birthday party wasn't the promotion party she thought it was." It did not reach the tabloids. It did not need to. Because people with real power rarely need headlines. They operate by presence. By Thursday, a boutique financial blog ran a short piece under the title, "Sterling Group's Leadership Reshuffle, Who's Actually in Charge?" They cited filings, not rumors. They listed the restructured trust, the updated signatory authority, and a note about the establishment of the Silent Seat Foundation, an organization now backed by more than $100 million, 0 cents in assets. Clarissa's name was never mentioned, but her absence screamed louder than any slander could. Then came the internal newsletter, the one we send every quarter to investors and senior management. It included a line that read, "Effective immediately, all financial decisions require dual authorization by Margaret Sterling and Noah Grant." A quiet bomb embedded in a memo. One former employee reposted that memo with the words, "She was cropped out of the family photo. Now she's the only one authorized to freeze the family fortune." I read that comment over tea. I did not smile. I simply nodded. The internet did what it always does. It did not need truth served. It found it. A bridal consultant from Manhattan commented, "I remember seeing her at an opening in '09. Everyone underestimated her because she never gave speeches." Another posted, "You do not survive 3 decades in this industry by accident. She built the table they are now banned from." The comments were not angry. They were reverent. No hashtags, no virality, just the steady buzz of clarity resurfacing. Clarissa, in all her ambition, had bet everything on a title she never held. She scrolled through the memo 3 times, hoping it was a mistake. Then her phone slipped from her hand. For the first time, she realized she had never been part of the power, only standing next to it. Andrew, in all his entitlement, had assumed my silence was the same as surrender. They had not understood the difference between being quiet and being erased. That weekend, a former florist from our company shared a photo of the birthday party centerpieces. She wrote, "She chose every bloom, and they did not mention her once." The caption read, "Funny how the woman who funded the flowers never made the photo album." The post got 20,000 shares. I was not tagged in any of them. But I read them, quietly. I read every line like a ledger. Each sentence was an unpaid debt finally acknowledged by the world. Clarissa did not speak publicly again after that week. Her last post was a filtered photo of her in front of the Grand Haven fountain. The caption, "Grace always wins." But comments had already changed. Underneath, someone wrote, "Grace didn't sign the trust documents." Another wrote, "Power isn't a speech, it is a signature." And finally, she thought she married into royalty. Turns out the crown was still in the drawer, and the queen never abdicated. I saved that one, printed it, framed it, and placed it right beside the brass plaque in my office, the one that says Founder. It remains there today, not because I need to gloat, but because sometimes the most powerful exposures are not loud. They are precise. They are earned. And they do not come with applause. They come with correction. The message came at 6:47 in the morning. Short, unpunctuated, almost shaking. "Why did you do this? You humiliated us." I stared at the screen. The name at the top said Andrew, but the words felt like they belonged to someone else, someone I had never met. I did not reply. Instead, I printed the message, slid it into a clear plastic sleeve, sealed the edge with heat. I placed it into a small cedar box beside an old wedding ring I no longer wore, and the receipt from the first property I ever purchased on my own. Symbols of loyalty, legacy, and love, all paid in full. The knock came 3 hours later. My assistant stepped in and whispered, "They're here." I nodded once. I had chosen the smallest private dining room at Grand Haven. No linen cloths, no catering service, just a pitcher of water, 6 chairs, and a view of the harbor I had bought for pennies and turned into an empire. When they entered, no one spoke. Andrew stood stiff, his eyes red-rimmed. Clarissa kept her head bowed, her mouth tight, and behind them came the couple who raised me, my adoptive parents. Older now, softer, quieter. They looked tired in a way that came from more than age. Clarissa sat first. Her voice came out thin. "We came to apologize." I waited. Andrew sat beside her, leaning forward like a boy caught stealing. "I panicked, Mom. I thought you were losing your grip. I thought—" His voice cracked. "I thought I was helping you. You thought I was something to manage," I said quietly. He swallowed hard. Clarissa reached into her purse and pulled out a photo. One of us, years ago, from a trip to Santa Fe. "I kept this," she whispered. "I always admired you. I just forgot how to show it." My adoptive mother spoke next. "We failed you," she said. "We let Andrew believe your silence meant weakness." My father nodded. "We told him you were lucky. We should have told him you were relentless." Andrew's voice broke again. "But why didn't you tell us, Mom? Why didn't you say you were the one behind all of it?" I looked straight at him then. No tears, no fury, only truth. "Because if you loved me," I said slowly, "you would have remembered me without proof." Silence settled like dust. Clarissa reached for my hand. I did not pull away. My mother bowed her head. My father stared at the floor. Andrew tried again. "I can't fix what I said, but I meant it when I said I was proud of you. You meant it," I said, "when you thought I had no voice left to contradict you." He nodded. I rose from my seat and walked to the window. The harbor gleamed beneath late morning light. Boats bobbed quietly. I thought of the decades I had spent building something that could not be denied, only disrespected. I turned back to them. "There is no revenge here," I said, "only redirection. You miscalculated who I was, but I never forgot who you could be." Clarissa whispered, "What happens now?" I gestured toward the door. "Now you walk out knowing the truth. And whether you carry shame or growth with you, that is your choice." Andrew stood. "I want to earn your trust back. You had it," I said, "and you spent it." He nodded again, slower this time. Clarissa followed him silently. My parents remained behind for a few moments, then stood too. "We see you now," my father said. "I always saw you," I replied, "even when you looked away." They left. I remained by the window, the harbor breeze kissing the glass. The silence did not hurt. It healed. Later that day, I returned to my apartment. I opened the cedar box, the wedding ring, the deed, and now the message. I did not cry. I simply lit a candle and whispered, "You remembered me too late, but I will not forget myself again." The next board meeting was full. All division heads, all legal representatives, all financial auditors were present. Clarissa sat quietly in the corner, clutching her notepad, unsure if she was supposed to be there at all. Andrew arrived late, eyes downcast, the weight of the past weeks visible in the slump of his shoulders. I sat at the head of the table and did not speak right away. Instead, I pulled from my briefcase a thin, cream-colored envelope and handed it to the firm's lead counsel. "I would like this to be entered into record," I said, "effective today." He opened it, glanced through the content, then raised his eyebrows ever so slightly. I turned to Noah, seated 3 seats to my left. "Noah," I said, "come here." He rose slowly, confused but composed, just like his father once was before the world taught him to run. I slid the official document across the table toward him. "This is a direct transfer of 15% ownership in Sterling Group," I said calmly. "Voting shares. Executive advisory privileges. Effective immediately." A hush fell over the room. Someone cleared their throat. Another shuffled papers, pretending not to stare. Andrew didn't move. Clarissa looked like someone had just doused her in ice water. Noah's hands trembled as he picked up the folder. I do not understand, Grandma," he said. "You do not have to do this for me." I looked at him, clear and unwavering. "Not because you defended me," I said, "but because you never needed me to prove anything." Noah blinked. His eyes glistened, but he did not cry. He only nodded. Andrew let out a breath that was almost a sob. Clarissa looked down at her lap. The rest of the meeting continued with little fanfare. We moved on to budget reviews, capital allocations, and year-end audits. But everyone knew a line had been drawn that day, not in revenge, but in clarity. 2 months later, Noah's wedding took place at Grand Haven, the resort where I had once rewritten my entire will. He chose a modest guest list, no influencers, no choreographed spectacle, just vows, vows that meant something. The ceremony was held on the western terrace, under the ivy arch I had planted 20 years earlier when the land was still bare and unforgiving. Noah's bride wore blue. Her mother gave a soft speech about grace. Noah thanked me without a microphone, only with a glance that said, "You matter to me." I did not sit in the front row. I chose a seat 3 rows back, between a florist and a kitchen manager I had hired myself. I wore dark green and held a small sprig of rosemary, memory. I watched, hands folded, no need to be seen, only to see. I had pressed that same sprig between the pages of my new will the night I rewrote it. It dried between decisions, a reminder that memory, even in silence, roots us in truth. When the music played and they exchanged rings, I felt something quiet and full inside me. Not pride, not triumph, just peace. Clarissa was there. She sat still as a stone, no longer the bride of ambition, just a woman who now understood absence. Andrew did not speak. He watched his son with the look of a man who had finally learned silence. After the ceremony, a few guests came to greet me. One young woman whispered, "Your grandson is so kind. It must come from somewhere." I smiled, then returned to my seat and looked out at the water. No camera was on me. No speech was waiting. The world had turned, and I had chosen stillness over spotlight. I sat there for another hour after the guests left, hand in my own hand. No one needed to hold it for me. I had learned, finally, that restoration does not come from being honored. It comes from refusing to erase yourself. And I had done that. Quietly, completely, and without asking permission. After the wedding, Andrew stopped showing up. No formal resignation, no email, no closure. One day his name was listed on the internal directory, and the next it simply was not. His badge pinged red at the executive door, his email was rerouted. The receptionist stopped saying his name. The company did not fire him. They simply stopped pretending he belonged. The office he once occupied was cleared out overnight, his executive keycard disabled, his voice mailbox reassigned. No one asked questions. They understood. A man who turned his back on legacy rarely walks forward again. He became, in all practical terms, the man who was once adopted. That was how the board began referring to him, quietly, respectfully, but with finality. And just like that, the chapter closed. Noah, on the other hand, came in early and stayed late. He met with every department head personally. He listened, not to correct, but to learn. He began to shift our internal culture. Less hierarchy, more humanity. He restructured the company's sustainability roadmap, tied executive bonuses to ethical supplier audits, and introduced maternity leave policies for hourly employees. The kind I had never dared to dream of when I was mopping the floors of banquet halls at midnight, all those years ago. He asked me once if I thought he was doing too much too fast. I smiled and replied, "It is only too fast for those still standing still." Then, one morning over tea, I told him I was ready to do something with the inheritance I had kept private. $5 million, 0 cents in personal capital, I had withdrawn quietly the year Andrew turned 30. I never told him. I never needed to. But that money had been waiting for a purpose deeper than penance. "I want to build something," I said, "for women like me." Noah nodded without asking for a business plan. "Then let us do it right," he said. 6 months later, we launched the Silent Seat Foundation. The name came to me in the middle of the night, after a dream, where I saw myself sitting alone at the side table during my own birthday, uninvited to speak, invisible to be honored but present nonetheless. The seat that was never offered, the silence that was never acknowledged, that was the place we would start. The foundation provides scholarships, transitional housing, and legal services to mothers who were discarded after raising children not biologically their own, or worse, whose biological children wrote them out of their own histories. The first application we received was from a woman in Ohio who had sold her wedding ring to pay for her stepson's college. He never invited her to the graduation. I wrote her back personally. "You do not owe the world another explanation," I said. "Only your peace." The day of the foundation's launch, we did not hire influencers, we did not host a gala. We rented a quiet library hall near one of our hotels, filled it with fresh daisies and silver folding chairs, and invited the women who had sent us letters. Some came with walkers, others came alone. But every single one came with a story. Noah stood behind the podium in a charcoal suit, his voice clear but low. He did not start with numbers or goals. He started with me. "My grandmother never raised her voice," he said, pausing to let the words settle. But the world finally heard her. A hush filled the room, not from awe, but from something deeper, recognition. He continued, "This foundation is not just about helping, it is about rewriting the narrative. For too long we've let love be defined by visibility, but real love happens in the background. It folds clothes, it pays bills, it keeps the light on without being seen." Women in the audience nodded quietly. He gestured toward me. This woman sat in the back row at my wedding, not because she was forgotten, but because she had nothing left to prove. I did not cry. I simply folded my hands in my lap and let the truth warm the room like sunlight on old stone. That night, after the guests had left, I walked with Noah through the empty hall. Chairs were stacked. The coffee table still held leftover lemon cookies. We passed by a banner with the foundation's logo, a quiet emblem of a single seat, elegantly drawn, unoccupied. He turned to me and asked, "Does it feel like justice now?" I shook my head. "No," I said. "It feels like healing." He put his arm around me, and we stood there for a long time, not speaking, not needing to. Legacy is not what you leave behind. It is who steps forward because you did not give up. And that night I finally knew mine was in the right hands. The letter came on a Thursday, no return address, just my name, handwritten in the center, with the kind of careful slant that made me pause. I sat by the window of my small home office, tea cooling beside me, and opened it with the same hands that had once held Andrew's bottle, wiped his tears, signed his tuition checks, and shredded the contract bearing his inheritance. It was from Andrew. The note was only 5 lines long. "I walked past Grand Haven today. I saw the lights on in your office. I wonder if you ever think of me. I know now what I did. If you ever want to talk, I'll be in room 7 next Thursday, noon." No apology, no full name, just that quiet suggestion of a final reckoning. I let the letter sit on the desk for a full week. I did not show it to Noah. I did not mention it to my advisors. But come Thursday, I wore navy, not black, and drove to Grand Haven alone. Room 7 was one of the smallest private lounges at the resort. I had chosen the wallpaper there myself years ago, a soft damask that reminded me of my grandmother's parlor. Andrew was already inside when I arrived. He stood up when I entered, but I did not offer a hug. I sat. So did he. There was no food, no flowers, no stage, just a mother, and a man who once called her garbage. He cleared his throat. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," he said. "I think I came to give it." I tilted my head. "To give what?" "To give back the story. I took it. I let Clarissa write you out of it. I helped her. I wanted her to think I came from nothing, so I could be her everything." I said nothing. He kept going. "She made me believe that your love was a transaction, that your presence was a stain. I needed her approval more than I needed your truth." I looked at him long and slow. "You did not just erase me. You replaced me." He nodded. "I know. And when the legacy crumbled, when she left after losing the board seat, I realized I had built my life on the foundation you gave me, but tried to hide the blueprint." The silence between us was sharp. He pulled out a small envelope. "These are the photos Clarissa deleted, the ones with you, from my graduation, from the fundraiser, from my wedding rehearsal. I found them in a hard drive folder called Unwanted." He slid them across the table. I did not touch them. "I don't need them back," I said quietly. "You do." He looked at me, older than I remembered, thinner too. "I came here hoping you'd say something that would let me start over." I smiled, small but not unkind. "You cannot start over with me, Andrew, but you can start over with yourself. Go build something honest this time." He stared down at his hands. "You really loved me?" I answered without pause. "I still do, but not in the way you might want. I love you the way a builder loves the first house they ever lost, not because it lasted, but because it taught them how to build without illusions. He stood, tears thick but unfallen. Do you hate me? I shook my head. No. I survived you. He nodded once, then left. I sat in room 7 alone, a long while after he was gone. Then I walked out quietly, passing through the resort lobby I had designed, past the staff who no longer asked questions, past the guests who never knew my name, and into the sunlight of a world I had rebuilt with new hands. The photo folder he gave me? I mailed it to a charity art program that used discarded images to teach children about restoration. Let them turn my erasure into collage. Let the next generation build beauty from betrayal. Let silence become art. If you were ever cropped out of the family photo, if you were ever asked to stay quiet so you would not ruin the wedding, then this story is for you, because trash does not write the family legacy. The ones who write it are the ones who paid for it, and paid the price in silence. Not every mother speaks loudly. Some build empires behind closed doors. Some write their love in deeds, not demands. And when the world finally sees them, it is not because they shouted, it is because they stood and never moved.